So I was just watching Angry Cops video about Operation Grim Beeper. Well, the name for it, by the way. And I was thinking about it. All right. And he said, how could they have turned beepers into explosive devices? And I ended up thinking in my head, I've got a great way to be able to explain this one, but I know how to be able to do it on a budget. All right. And to think about it, you could tell what sound. Hear the sound of the button? Click, click, click. All right. So, a few things that would end up being needed to be able to got to do it, but will simultaneously, would end up being able to give the chemical reaction needed. Because the factor that people end up, thinking is, the size ends up mattering. But when it comes down to a situation like this, there's a huge factor that always ends up playing a big, like the most vital role. Saturation. All right. So, for example, if you were to take an egg of silly putty, all right, you were to take 2 pouches of hot hands, all right, those pads that you press in during the heat, and it ends up going ahead and turning really hot. You go ahead and insert them into your gloves or your mittens, and they help act as a personal heater while going ahead to do things like shoveling snow. You know, you end up taking 2 of those, a egg of silly putty. All right, you take 2 batteries. You take the strike book of a of a matchbook. You also go ahead and shave off a few match heads, and then you go ahead and have 2 pieces of solder. All right. Oh, one more thing. Glass thermometer. All right. So you go ahead to the glass thermometer, you crack that open. Ultimately, you'll end up getting the mercury factor needed to go ahead and give the chemical reaction. You go ahead and put a little bit of a coating on the top and on the bottom of the shelling of the internal battery, of said beeper. Because remember, that click, that pressing of, the shell of the button to the receiver. Yeah, when it ends up going ahead and making contact, that ignition factor ends up going ahead and mattering. So, got your mercury. Then you go ahead, you dissect your battery. Lithium ion, cadmium. Alright? You go ahead and you have those two being separated by a very, very, very thin strip of paper. Alright? But that strip of paper needs to be able to be movable. Alright? So, in order to move that, ultimately you would end up having to, go ahead and be able to make sure that that paper could get out of the way, to allow the chain reaction. All right. You go ahead and you take some of the, sulfur from the end of the matchstick. You go ahead and you coat the actual bottom of the inside of the button. Then you go ahead and you have a little bit of a coating of mercury on there. All right. Then on the opposite side of the receiver, you have your lithium ion cadmium. All right. Now, the sulfur on sulfur effect is what's going to end up going ahead and giving the ignition. So you're going to make sure that that's on the back of the button that ends up moving forward to, complete the circuit. All right. You have your silly putty with your hot hands guts. Make sure it's as saturated as possible. Have that leading directly from where the button is, through a solder point, through a piece of raw solder. that connects to the internal part of the battery inside the beeper also. Press the button, boom!